Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording from our spring learning series with Rabbi Joel Rembaum.
Now let's look at the word. So nafla lo tasikum betulat Yisrael. Fallen not to rise is maiden Israel, abandoned on her soil with none to lift her. The key thing here is the word is a betulah, right? What's a betulah?
You know it, I remember.
Young unmarried woman.
Exactly, a young unmarried woman.
And some
right?
people think it means virgin, but I don't think it does.
No, it does not. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, the assumption would be, yes, that a young unmarried woman by definition would be a virgin.
But it's more about ritual status, and an entire religion's theologically was based on the other assumption.
But in regard to the word, what you're thinking about is the word there that's used in Isaiah is alma. All right, that's the word that the Septuagint interpreted as being a virgin. And that was a misunderstanding. Alma actually means a young woman, period. Okay, Elam is a young man. It's more than a kid, a child, right? It would be what we would call an adolescent. But when did people get married back then? When they were adolescent.
Yeah.
Right? Here, this Betula, this young woman, unmarried young woman, that's the key word, right? And, you know, who could have been her husband? Who is the woman, first of all? Who is the woman? Well, Betulat Yisrael. It's Israel, right? The people, all right? So who could have been the people's husband?
The land or God?
God. Yeah.
The Jewish people were married to God, right?
What? Well, I mean, the point is that, that pops up the way that, later on, of course, the Midrash interprets Song of Songs that way, right? But God sees himself. I'm trying to think of the example. Right. He adopts, there it's really a daughter. At one point, it's in, I think it's Deuteronomy, where it says, I have adopted you and you have adopted me. It was part of the Deuteronomic sort of a more, what shall we say, creative expression of the covenant concept. Okay. But here it's not husband and wife, actually, right? It's father and daughter. Okay. But the point is there you have God connected to the people through a relation. Here it definitely is defined in terms of marriage. And the point is, because the Betulah misbehaved and God has now separated, allowing the destruction to come in, right? So she's lying there, and who's going to take care of her? God was angry, and so he said, I don't want you. I'm not going to take care of you. That's what this is saying, okay? And the point is the prophet is saying this as a lament. It's sad. It's horribly sad that this disruption of a relationship was allowed to happen. Yes, Bert.
Is this common among the prophets? I mean, you said he's more sad than angry. He's not like yelling at the people, but you say he's mourning.
There's a sadness here, yeah.
Yeah, for the relation.
Yeah.
We think of prophets, we think of railing against immorality and all those things. It has an anger mixed in.
I that's a very good question. Right now, I can't answer it. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking Jeremiah would be the more kind of an emotion. There's emotion in his words. Let me check. Okay, let me time out. I'll find my and I will write down right here. All right. Let me see if I can do some research on that, and we shall learn together. No, it's a good question. It's a good question. All right. So God theoretically could have been the husband, but he's abandoned her, right? And in addition to that, who else could she have turned to? Well, theoretically, remember the people themselves have basically abandoned one of them. The peoplehood. Usually when you have a young woman like that, somebody will come and care for her. The point is, the other nations are not going to play that role. And the people have been basically, everybody else from the people is dissipated. Okay. And, yes, so it's a very stark image. Okay. But then now it's going on in verse 3 though. Ha'ir hayotzeit elef tashir me'ah, vayotzeit me'ah tashir asara lebeit Yisrael. Okay. The city that would march out, send out like 1,000 people is left with 100. And the one that would send out 100 people is left with 10. So the destruction is such an intense structure. You're talking about a 90% drop in the population. Now, the point is, this may actually reflect the reality. In the middle of the 9th century, of the 8th century, what nation, what empire is really shaking up the Middle East? Tybal.
Is it Assyria?
Yes, the Assyrian. Okay. And one of their typical strategy in dealing with a conquered nation is, well, what did they do with the northern tribes?
Population exchange, but not total exchange, just enough to disrupt the cultural norms.
That's correct, right? So this notion of being abandoned, it's as if, and this is in 850. Okay, now they have not yet made a move against Israel or against, Eretz Israel, that whole area. They're working further north on their way south. But clearly, when something like that happens, word spreads. It's impossible that's such a humongous thing. So he is now using that knowledge that, especially if he's aiming this at the upper classes. Remember, he's in Bethel, right? Which is the royal center of worship, right? And he's talking to them and to, by definition, also to Shomron, to the capital city. The point is, the people who are there are leaders, and they know what he's talking about. So this is the way he's framing it is intending to make an impact on people who know what's going on. But again, what a sad thing. These people are left, right? The power, the wealth, just a lot of the numbers of the people are gone, and you have this remnant left, this young woman, unmarried, the potential husband has left, and there's nobody there to care for her, okay? So it's a very moving, touching, powerful, scary thing, right? Okay, questions, comments? All right, moving on. So now we're going to do the first time we see the seek God and live, okay? So we talked about that, Psalm 34, verses 5 and 11. The wording is very similar, but you also have, 1 second. No. Yeah. All right. So the point is, so he's saying, God is saying, and this is the thing, this is the solution. God's offering to them, seek me out and you can live. All right. Now, so what does it mean to seek out God from our perspective?
That's a real interesting question. There's a part from 2 Chronicles in the daily liturgy. Seek out God. If God is everywhere, why do we need to seek God out?
Right.
And maybe it's because if our eyes are closed, we can't see the God that's been there all.
That's very possible. But what would blind your eyes?
Blind our eyes to God or to the
to God,
to knowing that God is there.
What God represents.
If we think everything is just people.
Huh?
If we think everything is just people.
Well,
if all we see is what we make and what we are, and don't see beyond that.
Right, but think of it.
If you have problems in life, like the poor, which you mentioned, you figure that how can there really be a God? Well, why would anybody be watching out for me?
Well, that they might be saying that, but I think what he's saying here. Remember, seek me and live. Seek me and live. So what does that mean, seek me and live?
Is he referring to prayer at all?
No.
Not at all. Okay.
You'll see that. By the way, that's coming up in the later chapters.
Okay.
Oh, no. We've already had a hint of that. I don't want your sacrifices, right? Don't run to these places and make sacrifices. Okay, some of it's here. That's going to come right away. All right, it's part of it is here. Right? It is here actually. Next line, but not prayer. It's sacrifice.
Is he saying that what life really is about is, and that if you seek God, that will bring you life? I don't mean physical, spiritual life.
Yeah, but remember, what is his concern? Is it the spirituality of the people? What have we been seeing in him? What is he? At whom does he aim his speech? Tybal.
He's not concerned, I think, with spirituality and how people are feeling. He's concerned about bad actions.
That's it.
And when Bert was talking, I'm just saying, it reminded me of what Bert said of the analogy. I mean, the distinction in Jewish prayer between asking for healing and asking for curing. I mean, I'm just saying that those kinds of, I'll stop. I don't know why I thought of that, but I was thinking that's part of where he's going, which is the process of coming to terms that even though there are these losses, people need to behave better, even when it's harder during difficult times.
Yeah, but I think he's also saying, how did we get into the difficult time? It's because people who have power have not sought God. For him, seeking God is, to be blunt, do Torah, right? That's his whole point. And Torah by him is less the worshipful side and more, as you said, Tybal, what you do. And all of it, what has he been saying? He's talking to the people who have the power. And what have they been doing? Oppressing the people who have less power. They're the people with the wealth. What have they been doing? Taking the wealth away from what they have from the poor people.
Right.
So that's the point. You guys are not, and you think you're making God happy, right? By giving sacrifices. And we've already seen that earlier chapters. No, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Sacrifices don't work.
Didn't they go back to sacrifice when the second temple was built?
Of course, ultimately he wouldn't say stop sacrifices. That's not his point. He's saying sacrifices are invalid unless the way you run your life is on the path, seek God, emulate God in how you act, justice, caring, those things, right? Fairness, that kind of a society, not stealing, corrupting, right? Building beautiful homes while the poor live in ransacked shambles. Hovels. Yeah, okay? That's the point. So that's an overstatement. I'm just giving a minor adjustment to what you said before, Barbara. The notion is generally the critique of sacrifices is often seen. As you see, the prophets themselves did not want sacrifices. That's an incorrect statement. They were not opposed to sacrifices. They were just saying they're hollow unless they're matched with action. Godly action, God-sanctioned action. And these people were not doing that. Okay, I think that's the point. All right? And now this is what he's going to say. Look at the next line. Okay, Al tidrashu Beit El v'hagilgal lo tavo. Right? Don't seek out. He's using those words here, right? Do not seek out Beit El. Seek out God, not Beit El. Okay, now Beit El, you could argue, not only was it a shrine, but that was a shrine where there was a golden calf. And so it's even worse, right? The Hagilgal lo tavo, and that there was a shrine there. Don't go there. And don't go in the south, Beersheba lo tavoru. But don't pass over the line and cross into the south, right? Why? Here's the thing. Look at the wordplay here. Ki hagilgal galo yigleh uveitel yihyeh la'aven. All right? Gilgal galo yigleh. Right? Gilgal will go into exile, and Beit El Aleph Lamed will become la'aven. Nothing. It says here a delusion. Aven.
What is that?
Nothing.
Aven?
Nothing. Okay. So that's the point, right? It's meaningless. And, and he looks at these places, with disdain because the priests there, they're saying, sure, come on, right? All right, the shrines are their days are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, one of the reasons is, I think, one of the reasons why these prophets, the ones we have, made it into the Bible, to be blunt, is because they got it right. We know from Jeremiah, for example, that there were other prophets. And later on, and we get to chapter 7, and he confronts Amaziah, the high priest in Bethel. So the issue of what is a prophet comes into discussion, all right? And the Navi, there were different kinds of Nevi'im. Well, I'm going to hold off on that till we get there. But the point is, Jeremiah tells us that the prophets and the priests were predicting good things, peace, and it didn't happen. Shalom, shalom, ve'ein shalom. Peace, peace, and there is no peace. Okay, that's Jeremiah. That's what these fake prophets in his age were saying. So there were other prophets around, who people considered to be prophetic, but they got it wrong. So their books were thrown out, whatever books there were, right? We don't know if it could have been written down, but they were destroyed. Or maybe they weren't written down. It all was oral. That could be. But the messages were out there, and Jeremiah says, you're wrong. And Ezekiel says, you're wrong. Okay? So, and Amos says, you're wrong. And Hosea said, you're wrong. All right? And they were proven right. History, as it turns out. And so it's as if history actually shaped the legitimacy of prophets, to be very, critical, shall we say. But clearly, the fact is that what these prophets taught shaped where Judaism would ultimately move, right? And this whole notion of this, of worship, yes, but action. And look, to carry it forward, when you get down to the struggles in the earlier centuries between Jews and Christians, when the Jews had the advantage still, the whole point was, what were the Christians saying? Oh, you guys just think about the worldly stuff, right? The material world, because you're very physical, materially oriented. That's your law. We are a tradition. Remember, those of you who took the book with me, of love, right? That's what the Christians were saying. And faith, that's the reality. And in a sense, they got it right, except they missed the point that for Jews, love of God is by showing love of other people. If you love other people, human beings, and if you love the world in which you live and appreciate the physical world which you are a part, and you thank God for that, and if you want to offer sacrifices to God to thank God for that, or offer prayers to God to thank them for that, you're being very spiritual, okay? But this whole approach of the critique of basically voided sacrifices, according to the prophets, it's an extreme statement, right? But yes, animal sacrifice continued to 70. There's no question, right? And the rabbis, don't forget, who had to deal with the fall of the temple. There were rabbis like Yochanan ben Zakkai, who wasn't so excited about the sacrificial cult because he had to deal with corrupt priests, which there were in the first century. Read the Christian Bible, all right? But the point is that the loss of the temple and its sacrificial cult was a huge tragedy for the Jewish people, okay? And luckily prayer had existed, so it took a number of centuries for the notion of prayer to become normative. For the rabbis it was, but they had to convince people that this new approach to God had to be valid. Yeah, eventually, they carried the day. But the point is, as you see, animal sacrifice was part of the culture, the religious culture of the world at that time. And the Jews were part of that, okay? And the fact, at a certain point, at the time of the destruction of the second temple, as was the case probably with the first temple, sacrifices were designed for the economy of the people, right? And so you brought what you could bring physically to God. And God was happy if you lived the life that the prophets taught, that the rabbis would be teaching. Okay? So, but it flows out of these prophets. Okay. Now,
I have a question about the next word. Are we in Shu?
What?
We're at this is 6 verse 6, right?
Shu et Adonai v'chiyu.
Okay.
Yeah.
So question, are you happy with the translation of seek? And the second part is the shorish of that similar to drash?
Yes, midrash, drash, darash.
So seeking then is not so much running after, but it's intellectual as well.
Well, yeah. Look, the earliest usage of the term. I'm trying to think. So somebody goes and he's doresh God, meaning he's looking. It's like seeking the oracle. What's the message from God? So that's how it's used religiously, cultically, right? Remember the high priest had the Urim V'Tumim, right? The Urim V'Tumim with the 12 tribes, and they would light up, and give answers. Or the dice, they would throw the dice and then give an answer from God. Okay, very archaic stuff. That's early First Temple stuff, But the point is, this notion was seek God, meaning go and listen to the messages that God wants to give you. That's how it began with the oracle. But then God spoke at Sinai, right, and gave the Torah, and that's at work now. So seeking God would be, go find what are God's messages.
Engaging in Torah.
Exactly. At this point in time, one way or another, we don't know. Remember, the first public reading of the Torah that we are aware of. Well, what is the first public reading of law? This is the question of the night.
Was it?
Where do we find the first public by a person? Forget about and commandments. Okay. Where do we find the first publicized reading of law? Bible.
Is it in Shoftim when there's the remembering that remember that there were these things supposed to happen and they were forgotten, or is it much later in Ezra and Nehemiah?
Well,
it's not getting two answers there.
No.
In Deuteronomy, what was it in Deuteronomy? Wasn't the king supposed to read the Torah out loud to the people?
Yeah, but that was the law, Bert. That didn't mean it happened. That was when the obligation was stated, but there were no kings yet in Devarim.
Right. No,
I thought it was first read in the marketplaces for the people to.
No, that's Ezra. That's later. The first time, according to Torah, the first time that law was publicly read to the people out of a scroll, actually, was Moshe. Exodus chapter 24. A law, meaning the law of the covenant, which would be 10 commandments plus Parshat Mishpatim, all the laws in chapters 21, 22, and 23. So Exodus 20 through 23. That is the law of the covenant. Moses twice recites this to the people. And this is all in chapter 24 as part of the covenanting ceremony that is described there, Exodus 24. And he reads, first of all, he speaks it. He memorized it, and he spoke it to the people. Then he wrote it down, and he read it to the people. Okay? And that's the first Sefer Torah. And it was public. Okay, so that's the first time. But in terms of a reading publicly on a regular basis, the rabbis ascribe that to Ezra because Ezra read the Torah to the people out loud, the full Torah, and presumably by that point, 450 BCE, it may have been actually the full 5 books.
Each week?
No, once.
Oh, okay.
In a ceremonial way. All right, but the rabbis, speak about the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly. It was during that period that public reading on Monday and Thursday, the market days, right? And on Shabbat, that became, according to rabbinic tradition, the norm. Okay, can't prove it. There's no reference in any document that we have that actually specifies it began in 300 BCE. No, sorry, we don't have anything like that. So that's the answer to that. Okay, so lidrosh ad Adonai means, right, to seek out God's message.
Mm-hmm.
All right, do it, remember, the psalmist was the same thing. It requires action on your part. You have to take the lead for yourself and do it. Right? God's not going to implant this in your head. You've got to reach out. You've got to learn it. You've got to digest it. Okay, and it may be that the notion in Deuteronomy where the king is supposed to read it, it's 1 in 7 years. That's part of the process, the public reading. And then it's carried at another level when Ezra does it. There's no king, obviously, but he's the great sage of the period, so he does. All right? Okay. Now, so again, but here, again, he's going back to this image of the fire, right? Dirshu ad Adonai v'chiyu, seek God and live. Pen yitzlach ke'esh beit Yosef ve'achla ve'ein mechaber. Lest fire will rush upon the house of Joseph and eat it up, and there is no one who can put out the fire in Beit El.
Or Pacific Palisades.
Huh?
Or Pacific Palisades.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody
Did you have anything left?
Those folks in Pacific Palisades must have been very sinful people.
I hope not.
There's got to be somebody in this country, some preacher, who said, them folks over there, they are sinners.
Oh,
and
that's
what
good.
happens? Read the book of Amos, chapter 5, verse 6.
It's really interesting because what happened, was almost a biblical proportion in terms of the size of it. And it was all nature. It was wind and...
Yes, but nature as altered by whom?
Us.
Mayor Bass?
Who? No. Human being.
Yes, okay.
Never, ever were there hurricane force winds in a forest fire in Southern California. Never heard of it before. And that's one of the problems. The firemen said this next day. There's no way we could have stopped it. Even if we had more water, more airplanes, more helicopters, we could not have stopped it.
But I think, it's funny. You talk about this and about some of the ancient ideas of God. There really was a sense that these kinds of things were God doing them.
Yes.
And that you could somehow appease God. We look at it as very primitive. You could somehow appease God by doing sacrifices. Although I guess Amos would have said, didn't work. This is in spite of your sacrifices, and there's a temple there. So all the bulls I slaughtered had no effect.
No, not you're right, the bulls. Yeah, right. Yes. God looked at it as a bunch of bull. Ha, ha, ha. Oh, did I say that? No.
It was terrible. I was out of the country and hearing about it, and people on the boat asking me about it. It was amazing.
But it is when you look at what is attributed to God in some of the Psalms, the power of wind, the power of fire.
Yes, of course. And the point is the prophets wanted them to internalize that, and it was hard because I don't see this God. I mean, somebody said before, back then it's very difficult to come. Oh, I know. It was this afternoon in another class I teach earlier today. So one of the students mentioned that even to this day, people have difficulty conceiving of an invisible God. We are physical people, and our physicality sometimes prevents us from thinking in non-physical terms, and probably a lot. All right, now the complaint. What did they do wrong? Okay, so you have here This hahofchim l'lanan mishpat utztaka la'aretz hanichu. They turn justice into wormwood. Okay, lana. Technically speaking, I looked it up. It's a green leafy vegetable. It's bitter, and by the way, it's used. You have bitters you put in mixed drinks. Ever hear of that?
Yeah.
It's made from lana.
Really?
Yes. So it can be used in moderate portions for medicinal purposes. However, taken in large portions, it's a poison.
It's interesting here. There are two words, mishpat utzkaha, and only one word in the English.
Say this again. What?
It's said there's two Hebrew words, mishpat utzkaha. It's two words, and in English it's translated as justice, as one word. I guess but in Hebrew.
No. You turn justice into wormwood. Wormwood is the name of that leafy vegetable.
But doesn't utzkaha?
Tzedakah is righteousness, is turned.
Right. So that's not translated here.
Explain. You are the ones who are hofchim lala'ana mishpat. You take justice and you make it into something bitter. And you take tzedakah and you cast it to the ground.
Okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Well, if the first three-letter words, Bert, are hachofchim la'ana mishpat, and that means you, plural, will
Right.
turn to wormwood justice.
Right.
That's the exact,
Right.
but then they put it in a little bit differently in
Right.
English to make it a little bit easier to understand.
That was what I misunderstood.
Yes, that's right. Yes. All right, Tybal.
By chance, because I hadn't heard of this and not being a drinker, I've only read about bitters. Does anybody use this vegetable to make the bitter herbs for Pesach, Seders?
I don't know.
Is this indigenous to Israel still?
Where would you buy it?
I don't know. I guess a liquor store.
Well, I mean,
No. Bitters is a liquid that my parents used to use. I think I still have a bottle of it.
Yeah. A lot of homes have like bitters, but that's used a few drops, so it's fine. It's flavored. It gives it a tartness for a mixed drink. That's what it's for. But the point is, green leafy vegetable. I don't know. I mean, this is out of my realm here. I'm not a botanist. I did do some research on the things that you can use that are mentioned in the Talmud for maror. And a lot of them are indeed leafy green vegetables.
Oh, interesting.
Like, for example, no, help me. Come.
Ale?
Celery.
Yeah.
Celery can be used.
You can use lettuce, dark green lettuce.
Romaine?
Romaine lettuce, yes. The dark green. Oh, come on, I'm making. My mind just went blank. Very disappointing. I saute it with my eggs. I love it.
And it's a green vegetable?
Yeah. Come on. Bitter. It's a bitter green leafy vegetable. You know what it is.
Beets? No.
No. Oh, never mind. It'll come to me. It'll come. Arugula.
Arugula. Oh, yeah, it is bitter.
Yeah. Yes, arugula. But there's a whole bunch of them that are related, actually. Dandelion leaves can serve that purpose. There's a whole bunch of, and they grow here and they grow in Israel. So yes, to your question, Tybal, there are these types of plants, and that's why the rabbinic sources from Israel, actually specifically pinpoint them. Yes, they do. All right. So anyway, but the point, you see what he's saying. You're taking this powerful, what could be a pathway to God. It should be in your thoughts sweet, but you convert it into bitterness. And tzedakah, righteousness, which should be the way you govern, you control yourself, should be in a righteous way. But you step it, throw it on the ground, right? It's nothing. Get it out. Garbage. All right. So, yes. All right. So that the other. So then. Oh yes, I know what I wanted to show you. I want you. Now you got to look at the Hebrew. There's a chiasm here in these 6 words.
Yeah, sure.
Hofchim is your action word. You can't, you change. So that's A. Hinichu means you cast to the ground, is A prime. La'ana is the element that is the negative force, and aretz is the element that is the negative, it's part of the negative thing. That is a vehicle in the destruction of righteousness. That's the B's. And C, mishpat, is the equivalent of tzedakah. ABC, CBA, and there you got it. Okay? God save the chiasm. All right. Moving on. I just throw that out. But again, this you can see how much this is a literary device that they use all the time. All right. But the term, by the way, tzedakah mishpat, here it's mishpat tzedakah, right? Is found frequently in the Bible. The two of those words linked together. Okay? Tzedakah mishpat. When God speaks about Abraham before he tells them about what he's going to do at Sodom and Gomorrah, right? He says that that's the irony here. Okay? This is what God says to Abraham. Yadatib laman asher yitzavet banav ve'et beito acharav. I will teach Abraham, will teach his descendants, right? Vishamru derech Adonai la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. And they will keep the path of God to do righteousness and justice. This is what God said. And the children of Abraham will do that, right? Laman havi Adonai lechem, so that he can bring to you all those things he said to Abraham. So he knows that this is what Israel is going to do. Well, God isn't perfect. He misjudged. I mean, that's what Amos would say, right? And it's just ironic that those two words are used in the context of a statement by God like that. It was, I guess you could say, it was God being aspirational. You know the term, right? He aspires toward that. All right, moving on. So now the doxology, as we said, this powerful force. So Hema and Ksil. Look at now verses 8 and 9. All right? Oseh Hema Uksil. All right? So that is the first thing that we see. He made Hema and Ksil. What are they? They are Pleiades and Orion. Right? You will find these terms a few times elsewhere in the Bible. Okay? But it's rarely used, but nonetheless it is used. And by the way, they are sources that are that are influenced to one degree or another with the traditions of Chokhmah, the ancient wisdom tradition. Okay, so there are, constellations in the heaven. God made them. Talk about power, right? Hofech laboker tzalmavet. He changes boker, meaning what?
Morning, day.
Into tzalmavet. What is tzalmavet?
It's probably night.
Yes,
Is
more
it
than that.
about light, the absence of light, and then the coming of light?
Well, no, he changes. Well, no, what he can do is the morning is the coming of light. Yes, of course. Morning is the coming of light, but if he wishes, he can flip it just like that, and it becomes Tzalmavet. Now, Tzalmavet you find it in the 23rd Psalm. Gam ki elech belgei Tzalmavet lo irara. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Okay, so people, the folk interpretation of Tzalmavet is sail, which means a shadow, a shade, and Mavet is death.
Death, yeah.
So you think the valley of death, of the shadow of death, right? Actually, no. If you look in our dear friend, the KB lexicon, you find it doesn't mean that at all. Tzalmavet actually means a form of darkness that you can cut with a knife. Mm. It's a thick, gooey darkness. In other words, it's so dark that it looks like you could cut it with a knife.
That would be like the darkness of the 10 plagues.
Yes, right, yes. Okay? So God can do that. In other words, Boker, and think about it, Boker, the light of dawn, is for the human being a significant moment because it means you survived the darkness of the night. And you say,
Right.
oh, thank God the sun is coming up. But if God wanted to, 2 seconds later, it could be this absolute horrific darkness. That's the power of this God, Tybal.
So, when you said Salmavet to me, and I don't know if it's a homonym or the related root, I thought of the angel of death. Is the root related, or it just sounds similar?
It sounds similar as far as I can see. There are other words, excuse me. There are other Middle Eastern words. Remember that this is all based on comparative language, right? And they find the similar roots in other ancient Near Eastern languages. And it's clear that it's not talking about death. No. I mean, the modern Midrash is, shadow of death. But it's sort of there, the fact that psalm served as a source of comfort for mourners, sort of made that word into and I don't know which came first, the need for interpreting it that way or the actual belief that was the word. I don't know. But, for the sake of, in times of grieving, and it's used very frequently, that, it is this notion, I have seen death, but it doesn't take me, I have come out of that. In other words, I've seen the death of my loved one, but I can still have the faith and hope that I will emerge out of this darkness to dawn, okay? But here, it deals really with the antithesis between the breaking light of morning that can suddenly be flipped, right? And the same thing, the V'yom l'layla hechashich, and the similarity, he can take day and make it into darkness, okay? But then...
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, what?
What are the Pleiades and Orion?
There are different constellations. Orion's belt, the 3 stars.
Oh, okay.
I know where I can see that in the heavens. I don't know where the Pleiades is. It's up there. Oh, there it is. I don't know where. Okay. All right. But by the way, you can see here, though, that middle of the 8th century, the use of the constellations, right, as evidence of divine power. Well, now you're getting astrology.
And they had the names then, too.
They had names. Yeah, exactly. Kima and Ksil. Yes. Okay. So the God is this powerful being, as I said before. But here now, going forward, verse 9, it is God here. This is the same God. Hamaplig shod al az, b'shod al mibtsar yavo. He hurls destruction on something strong, on strongholds. B'shod al mibtsar yavo. And brings ruin upon fortress. Okay. And maplig means to hurl, to suddenly flash, which means there's a sense of it happens, boom. Okay, it's not a delaying process. It suddenly strikes. Okay, so suddenly a stronghold, boom, goodbye, it's destroyed. Suddenly a fortress, boom, it's gone. So again, this is bringing the power of God down from the heavens and translating it into the reality of what a powerful enemy will do. And the basic point is the powerful enemy is basically a tool in the hands of God. Okay? That's how Jeremiah, by the way, defined Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was a tool in God's hand to punish the Israelites. Okay? And that was an expression of this tremendous power. Okay, so he is in a sense sort of preceding that. It doesn't say it. He doesn't explicitly say that the enemy who's going to do this, at least here he doesn't, is a tool in the hands of God. But it's the same concept. All right, now we have the second complaint, right? The second one, which is verses 10 through 13, which is Sinu San'u Basha'ar Mochiach V'dober Tamim Yita'ebu. So they hate the Mochiach. Here the translation is arbiter. Probably means that a Mochiach, Hocheach Tochiach Atamitecha, means to rebuke, right? So here it means it could be arbiter, but it could also be the one who points the finger of blame in a trial. You understand what I'm saying, right? If you're supposed to yell at a person who does wrong, okay, that's in Leviticus 19. Hochiach tochiach et amitecha. Rebuke your friend. You're doing them a favor if you tell them what's wrong. So the mochiach here, remember the sha'ar, the gate of the city is where the court met. So this could be somebody who stands up, maybe an arbiter, but I like to think better. This is a witness who stands up before the judges and says, he did this, you did this and such, and you know it, pointing to the guilty party, all right? But what do? They hate when that happens. They want to disrupt that process because the fingers are going to be pointed at whom? Them. You understand what I'm saying? I can't see from your faces whether you're absorbing it. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is that is a negation of justice, right? And similar, dover tamim yitaevu, and they despise people who speak the truth, right? Tamim can mean whole. Here it means plea is just. Yeah, I'm saying, Noah, ish tamim, right? He was an upright, true person before God. Okay, so that's the thing here. So this is the perversion of justice. And then it goes on. A theme we've already seen. Lachen yal boshaschem al dal, right? You have literally, and here, yes. Lachen ya'an boshaschem al dal, because you have treaded upon the poor, all right? The term is used like when you squeeze grapes, right? So you are stepping upon the poor. And at the same time, you take grain from him, a levy of grain. In other words, not only do you depress the poor, but you also take from him that which is he needs to live. And what do? Batekazit benitem. Once again, remember the homes of the wealthy. That was the thing he talks about all the time. So you have these homes that are built of hewn stone, not just regular stones, cut stones, expensive stone, right? And you build them, okay? V'lo tishtu et yenam, but I'm sorry. Wait a minute, no. I skipped. But take a zit beneath them. You build these beautiful homes, and but you're not v'lo teshvu bam. You're not going to live in them. And you planted karmei chesed, beautiful, wonderful vineyards. V'lo tishtu et yenam, and you're not going to drink the wine. Okay. Now it's interesting. This is tit for tat almost. They stomped on the poor people like people would stomp on grapes. And because of that, the grapes that they do get, they're not going to be able to drink. See? Beautifully done. Beautifully done. And this notion of this root, boshaschem, the root is bet, shin, sin, samach. Guess what, guys? This is a hapax. It's the only time the verb is used in the entire Bible. Remember our old friend, Mr. Hapax?
No.
This is an example of it. But again, you can see how erudite our prophet is.
Which verb? Where is it? Which verb? Where is it?
Boshaschem. The third word.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it.
The root is bet, shin, samach.
Shin, samach.
Yeah, okay. And it's the only place it's found. In this, he's like Isaiah. Isaiah loves to pick out these very arcane words and use them. Okay, because why? Ki yadati rabim pisheichem v'atzumim chatotechem. I know, right, how multitudinous are your sins, and how strong, how powerful, how atzum. It can mean, here he says countless, but it can also mean otzma's strength, and how overpowering your sinfulness is. Sorei tzaddik, you who cause evil for the righteous. Lokhe kofer v'evyonim b'sha'ar hitu. You take bribes and you pervert justice in the gates. So you can see the continuity of this thing, right? Unjust. It's picking up the theme of verse 10. Okay, verse 12. picks up the theme of verse 10 again, going back to what goes on in the gates of the city, the perversion of justice. Okay, and then 13. Lachen hamaskil be'etahi yidom ki et ra'ahi. A person, the prudent person, maskil is the same root as seichel, right? The wise person will keep tired because it's an evil time. So the question is, who's going to keep silent? Is this the time for silence? Okay.
Why does the prudent keep silent? Is he afraid that
Stay out of
somebody
trouble.
will harm him?
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah, he's afraid someone will hurt him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sound familiar? Tybal.
Is there a way to know whether something is a hapex legomenon or whether it's a neologism that somehow from a root it's truly being constructed from the first time, which is different?
That's a very, very good question. I can't answer it. Let me just, since you've asked, hold on. I will lean forward and see if there are any cognate words.
Well, but the thing is, then it would need to be staged by when it was found, because even if there are other cognates or other uses, if you don't know which one is the first.
Right. Wellhausen suggested it may be based upon the Akkadian sabasu sibsa, which means to exact a tax on grain, which would fit. 1 second. Now here's again the question is, that could be the root, because look at the next verse. It says, and you take exact a heavy levy of grain from them. Now I don't know if and there's an Akkadian root that is somewhat similar, except it's SABS rather than the order of the letters is different. I'm getting technical here. It's not clear. All right. But it's interesting because that Akkadian, the same letters are found, and it has to do with the second clause here, which is taking a levy of grain. And that's the Akkadian meaning. And Akkadian, of course, is a sister language to Hebrew. So it could be, but clearly it's here. It doesn't mean to extract grain. It's they're stepping on something. And the fact that the context here relates to wine, it makes sense that could be the meaning. Yeah. So I don't know. I am not steeped enough in these ancient languages to know the full extent of where that could be. Sorry. But it's a good question. We don't know how often. I mean, it may be that the prophet, Tybal, the prophet, may have taken that root and used it in this way. And, he decided to be more flexible in the use of that term. So, don't know. All right. So, you pervert, right. Getting back to the maskil here. My thought is that in an evil time, the prudent person should remain silent. I'm wondering if he is using that and making fun of it, because he epitomizes the antithesis of that. Do you understand what I just said? He epitomizes the antithesis to that statement. He is a wise person who's yelling and screaming, not remaining silent. And he's saying, it's as if he said, ha! And they say in a time of evil, you should remain silent. As they say in Yiddish, an echteker tog, right? Yeah, someday, I'm wondering if he's being sarcastic, because clearly he would not, and he's saying that's essentially what's going on. That's the reality of what people say. And it's horrific, because you got to call these evil people to account, not let them get away with it.
Such as our president has to be called to account. Such as our president has to keep being called to account and going before courts to say what you're doing is bad.
Yes.
Same thing as this.
All right. What time is it? Oh, all right.
9:04.
All right. We will finish. Let me just finish it up. Okay. So now he's going again, saying, right, we said before, he's coming back to that theme as part of the structure, right? Dirshu tov ve'al ra laman tichyu. Seek good, not evil, if you want to live. This is what's going to happen to you. Because you do that, what I said before about how powerful God isn't going to punish you, that's what's going to happen. But you have an out. Dirshu tov ve'al ra. He's coming back and repeating what he said at the earlier part, right? Lamont, so you can live, right? V'hichein Adonai Elohei tzvaot itchem. And God will be with you, kasher amartem, the way you think he is. God will really be with you. Sinu ra ve'ahavu tov. Hate, if you want to hate evil. Love goodness. V'hatziku b'shar mispat, right? And present justice in the gates. Ulai yechanan Adonai. Maybe God will have compassion upon you, okay? And again, he concludes with the mourning, right? Grieving. Ko amar, lachen ko amar Adonai, therefore God said. But look what God's called. Adonai, Elohei, Savaot, Adonai, which means Yud-He Vav-He here is not supposed to be pronounced Adonai, right?
Oh, really?
Well, originally it wasn't Adonai, it's Yud-He Vav-He. How do you pronounce that? We don't know.
We don't know.
The current, Yahweh, that's what some people say. We don't know what it is. But now
So
you get a sense.
If you were reading this in the synagogue, you wouldn't read it as Hashem.
No. You would say, Ko Amar Adonai Elohei Tzvaot.
Okay, that's right.
Adonai.
Hebrew, yeah.
I mean, that's why you have to do it. And if you look at the Nikud, the vocalization of Adonai, of Yud-He Vav-He, look at it. You have a Shva, okay? You have a Cholam on top of the Hey, and a Kamatz under the Vav.
Right.
Now look at the vocalization of the word Adonai.
It's a darshan.
You have a Shva under the Aleph, a Cholam above the Dalet, and a Kamatz under the Nun. Now, except Adonai with a Shva is unpronounceable. How do you pronounce Aleph with those two vertical dots? Say it. You can't. So in order to make it pronounceable, the grammarian stuck in a patach. That's called a chatav patach, okay? A cut-off patach. So, but really, the vocalization should be Shva Cholam Kamatz, which is the way it is under Yud-He Vav-He. So that's how Jehovah came about. It's a misunderstanding of the vocalization. Jehovah has the vocalization of Adonai.
Right.
Let's see. Here, see it all laid out. I see your hand table. Just a second. But look what he's doing here. Right? He's really emphasizing. You got Adonai, Elohei Tzvaot, Adonai. Right? All of these different names for God clumped together. Barbara.
I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
You can unmute if you need to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't need to.
Okay. The clustering of these names. Why is he doing that? Again, I think he's clustering the names to indicate the power of this God. You want to call him? He's got all these names, right? His private name, Adonai, the God of the heavenly hosts, powerful. Adonai, my master, the boss. This is who we're talking about, guys. You want to play games with him? Tybal.
So Yemenite pronunciation is supposed to have vocalizations that Ashkenazi, Sephardi, whatever, doesn't. Is this one of those situations where it's really only about ayin, not Allah? In other words, would Yemenite pronunciation have a better approach to what you said, the schwa under an aleph?
No,
under aleph.
No, I mean that's the vocalization is not Ashkenazic.
No, but it's Sephardi, and I think I've heard scholars say that they think the Yemenite is actually closer to what ancient Hebrew was, or biblical.
Maybe, but then all you're saying is the possibility that a more guttural aleph would be expressed. So it'd be more an ayin by them is right? They pronounce their ayins. It's almost like a swallow. And some say that the aleph actually should be a softer form of a guttural. Now, if that's the case, and I don't know, I mean, I've heard Yemenite Torah reading, and yes, it sounds more like Ashkenazi stuff. But nobody knows for sure if that is the original Hebrew or if it is a Hebrew whose sounding is picked up more from Arabic, okay? Because the Arabic also has a lot of guttural language. So I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. So I can't answer your point. I don't know. All right. Anyway, so again, what's the result going to be? This is what this powerful God says. B'chol rechavot misped v'chol chutzot yomru ho ho. There's mourning, bereavement in all the open spaces, and they're saying, "Woe, woe unto me!" V'karu ikar el ha'evil, and they will even call into the city farmers to join in the lament because they're running out of people to lament. Umisped el yodei nehi. Yes, and there is. They need to call the people who know these professional lamenters, people who know how to say the keynote and to sing them. They're often women, by the way. They have to be called in because the population has been so decimated. If you want to lament, you need people to gather together. But who are you going to gather? There's nobody here, right? It's like the same thing we said before. The Betula is sitting by herself, all by herself. Who's going to take care of her? And now he's saying, who's going to do the lamenting? There's nobody around. They've been sent out. They've been killed. They've been sent to exile. It's empty. They can bring in farmhands. But then he says, but the irony is, even in the vineyards, there is this woe, right? Because I am going to pass through your midst. City and farm are going to be desolate of people. Gone. Goodbye. Okay? So, a very powerful, emotional segment. It's not the whole chapter. We'll get to that next week. All right? Wow. I'm tired.
I like your new glasses.
Huh?
I like your new glasses.
No, I've been wearing these. Oh, you haven't seen?
I didn't see them.
Yeah, no, I've been wearing them. They're reading glasses.
Excuse me.
Huh?
Excuse me.
Yes, I wouldn't wear them in public. No, I'm going to, actually I have a prescription which I have to fill. So someday soon you'll see me with different reading glasses. Yeah. All right. Any final comments, questions? I hope, I get all worked up on this one because I want you to get a sense of the energy, the power. You feel the prophet really laying his guts out. And I think it's to me, it's a very, very powerful statement. Okay. All right. So now, we will close. I'll see you all next week. There's some people I know who couldn't come this week, so our group will be
a lot of competition.
Huh?
A lot of competition for tonight.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's okay. And we should conclude. Just to keep in mind when we began, Tybalt put on that beautiful picture of the light over Jerusalem, and it's ironic that we're reading this chapter tonight, right? It speaks of lament and reasons for sorrow. Not that it's the same as what Yom HaZikaron, which is what we're entering in now, the Day of Remembrance, which is the day before Yom HaTzmaut. But the sorrow that is expressed here, it shows you the complexity of sorrow, right? And I think these past years, on Yom HaZikaron, the sorrow has been very complex because the situation in which we find ourselves is very complex. And maybe I was trying to think, is there some way that you can I think you can very easily relate this chapter to a sense of kina, right, of a lament, of feeling very hurt because of what has happened. And we Jews in the diaspora are hurt in ways that are different from those of the Israelis, because with the rise of anti-Semitism. So it is a time for mourning. There's no question. Maybe.
Can I ask you a question about the last two verses?
Let me just finish.
I'm sorry. I thought you were. I apologize.
Maybe it was Beshert, actually, that the class fell on this night. I know I wanted this because I wanted to get into this.
These are citizens.
Somebody's talking.
Gary, turn off your sound.
I'm sorry. You're right. Right.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so I think it turns out just by coincidence that it's appropriate. It's a kina, among others, and it's a kina that also sees human error and mistakes as part of the process. As we know, that has been part of the process of that, which has led us to the sadness. So it's not so inappropriate. Okay, Barbara, yes.
Yeah, in 15 we have Adonai Elohei Tzvaot, and in 16 we have Adonai Elohei Tzvaot Adonai. But
Yes.
the two different Adonais. Why did they have to put in the second Adonai?
Emphasis. Remember, when you have repetition like that, it's an attempt to just emphasize this is this God, right? It's not just any old God, and that's the whole point. Remember, in the middle is the statement, the doxology that tells us who this God is. This God can flip around nature. This God deals with forces and powers that you guys, human beings, can't even imagine, right? It's the same God. These are his names. Okay, so it's emphasis.
Okay, because they actually don't say, they call him in the one the eternal and the other the sovereign. That's fine. They're just using different words, but then they don't mention the second Adonai.
Well,
in the translation.
There was one of the problems with the JPS translation was that it was not always literal. They're trying for the sake of the reader to understand the intent, right, where it wants to go, rather than how you got there. I mean, you can argue both ways.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I can get that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See you
Okay.
tomorrow.
All right, guys. I can say we shed a tear, but then rejoice on Yom Ha'atzmaut.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to www.tbala.org.